Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and wherever you are, whenever you are. Welcome to the community live stream. My name is Chuck Tomasi, and I am just seeing if there it is, YouTube is up and running. Oh, it's never a dull day around here. My name is Chuck Tomasi from ServiceNow. I am the ServiceNow guy with the cool bow tie. Been here for just over 9 years, customer for a couple of years before that, and my specialty is in the platform, and obviously not pushing buttons this morning on the console and getting the AV stuff running, but that's beside the point. Let's bring you the community live stream. That's this show. The community live stream gets you not only the answers to the community, but the journey of discovery, the thought process, the reverse engineering that goes into that, so that you can take those skills to your organization to become a more effective ServiceNow developer and administrator. That is that. So now you know who I am, what this is, and what you'll learn. Let's get on with it. If you are watching this on YouTube, thank you very much. I am, just to keep an eye on it, see if anybody has joined. Give me a shout out in the chat. Love to hear from you, where you're from. Say hello, say hi. How's the weather, that sort of thing. Steve is online and rolling. And I'm just going to make sure that, once again, Twitch has chimed in about, I'm going to take a look at this. Twitch has chimed in. We've got saying that it's live streaming, but no sign of YouTube yet. Sometimes it shows up hours later. If you were paying attention over the weekend, there were a couple of announcements that, hey, ServiceNow Community is broadcasting. And there were real short, nothing videos that said something like this. Hey, we're down for maintenance. Well, that's because I was doing some testing. There was a problem streaming on Friday. I had to work that out. So Saturday I was doing a few tests here and there. So that's all been addressed. Obviously, we're live streaming. I can see it on the screen. Steve's in there, and a number of other people are joining. So thank you very much for joining. You can also watch this on Twitch. Oh, I forgot to mention, if you find something useful, helpful, maybe even laughable a bit, don't forget to check the like button so that other people know that you are there. Good morning, James. Good morning, Shane. Hope all is well in your part of the world. There we go. Now YouTube's caught up. It says, I would expect a few more people to show up at this point. That's just a quick screen capture of my phone. So, finally got the time to take the live stream. And I've got something special planned for you today, based on a question that was actually originally posed Thursday. The discussion went on Friday, and I said, you know what, that would make a great community live stream topic. So I may be focusing most of the show on one specific follow-up, because this person is new to Flow Designer. But before we get too deep into that, go to Twitch, makes a great backup plan. Banu, Larry Hudrick, local guy. Hey, maybe see you at the Phoenix Developer Meetup next week. Speaking of developer meetups, before we get there, let's go over to the community at ServiceNow.com. If you've got more than just a, hey, hello, how are you? See you next Thursday. How's the weather? Put that in the community. Your ServiceNow questions go in the community. You'll get subject matter experts that respond to them. You will get screenshots and details. Sometimes people approach me on LinkedIn or email or my personal website. I appreciate it very much, but that's not going to get the most value for you, for me, for the others in the community. I can't tell you how many times I have gone into the community to search out an answer of, is this going to work? Is this what I'm after? Is this even possible? To see if somebody else has explored that. That's the value of the community. And if you don't know the answer, then you pose a question and go, hey, everybody, what do you think of this? How do I do that? What's the best way to solve X? And whether it is performance analytics or SecOps or developer scripting questions, post that in the right forum in the community. Please only post it once so it doesn't get confused when somebody looks later and says, well, there's 5 of these things. Which one is the right one? I'm not going to read all 5 of these and try to follow the question and answer. No, one. One question per post, put it in the right community, and you'll have the best results. Sorry if the voice is a little rattly today. We had a annual traditional pool party on Saturday, so I'm a little worn out from that. But won't stop us from doing a show. I have the herbal tea at the ready. Keep those vocal cords lubricated. Good morning, the Da Vinci technology. We heard some interesting things regarding Flow Designer K19. What is the best use of Flow Designer? I That's a great question, Steve, and I will get into that in just a second. Let me finish up the pre-roll first. So onward, after the community, if you haven't already done so, I highly encourage you to go over to the developer portal at developer.servicenow.com. See if I can find that real quick. I may have even accidentally put that away. That's not it. That's not it either. There it is. Developer.servicenow.com. Main page looks something like this. Free personal developer instance, free learning plans, free blog with lots of recent announcements. And as New York approaches, yes, our New York release is coming out in Q3, and that is coming very, very quickly. We will have blog articles on what those new features are and how you can take advantage of those. But that's coming up soon. We also have, oh, didn't want that. Well, there's the blog. Madrid instance is now available for developers. That's a bit old. I was looking at we now have backup capabilities. So if your instance expires, because these are free personal developer instances, they do go away if you don't use them. And if that happens, we now have a way to claim a new instance or restore your old instance, and you get a new one with the old feature or the old work back on it. So no more, hey, I was in the middle of a project. Well, first of all, if you want to be doing that backup, do your diligence and export those update sets to XML or publish it to GitHub so you can have that backup if your instance goes away. Mine, I don't care. I use it as a scratch pad. It's hosting this show. It's doing odd things. And if it goes away, which it did while I was on vacation in May, I come back, I get a new one, fresh start. Here we go. So let me see if I can catch up on some of these comments. Lieberger said, good morning, everybody, and especially to Martine and Mr. Ravagan. Sudhir says, we have a backup we can restore from last month. Yep. All right, that's the developer portal. Go check it out if you haven't done so already. The other thing you can find on here is events. Let me put that there under the events menu. We have some meetups coming up. Copenhagen, Amsterdam, New Delhi, Chicago, New York, London, Minneapolis, Houston. Still not seeing the Phoenix one. I got to figure out why. It's on meetup.com. As I can see, the big map. Over 16,000 people, over 50 chapters, and our next meetup in Phoenix is coming up on June 27th. So it's supposed to be importing this stuff regularly. So if you're in the Phoenix area next week, why not stop on by? You can find a whole bunch of ServiceNow developers hanging out, talking about, we're gonna dissect and play the Jeopardy game that I introduced at Knowledge 19. Lots of cool technical bits in there, because that's what developers talk about, is those technical bits. We also have a workshop coming up. Put that subtitle away, put my head away. There we go. So I'm not standing next to Stacey Bailey. Next week, Tuesday, the 25th, we will be talking about the email client and how to configure it. Did a little bit of this on Friday, gave you a sneak peek of this, as to how to turn it on and the ACLs, but there's more to it. There are client templates, there are client configurations, there are recipient qualifiers. There's all kinds of cool stuff in here that I love to share with you. And that's what we'll be doing in just over a week, 8 a.m. Go to that bit.ly link, TN64Reg, and get signed up for that. We also have Q4 all planned out. It's been approved. The shows for October, November, and December are lined up. No more than a title and a date at this point, but as they get closer, I'll flesh them out. Don't worry. Right now, the focus is on delivering June, putting together July on ATF, and the big one, August, New York platform features. So lots of wheels in motion at this point. I love my job. What can I say? The other thing, last thing before we get going on this, is any script or code we write today will be made available in GitHub at the URL you see there in a dated folder for June 17th, 2019. It will be 2019-06-17. You can find it there. Links in the description on YouTube, links in the post on the community. So I'll have the video, the articles we talk about today, and a link to any code will all be on the community. So you just look for video : community now community live stream, and it will have today's date on there. You can find everything you need in one nice package. a video about the community, on the community, with links to everything that we covered. How's that for complete? Know any other videos that do that for you? I don't. But if you do, let me know. I'd love to steal some of their good ideas. Let's get started then. I said that I'm going to bypass the community a little bit here. I'm not even signed in this morning. I had to throw things together and do an update on my laptop. And 10 minutes before the show, it just finished this OS update. So let's see. Sudhir says, we have backup. Sudhir said, I heard in last update, hello from Turkey. Good morning, or in your case, good afternoon, or good evening, Tech-In. I believe you are at least 10 hours ahead of me. So it's probably more like 4 p.m., 5 p.m. Whew. Now, what I wanted to cover is this particular post. Where did it go? Not the events. It's this one. This was posted 4 days ago, so that would make it Thursday. It says, script to compare dates. And it started out with a scheduled job. It said, I'm struggling to create a script for a scheduled job that would do the following. I want to check all the change requests with conditions status review, close code is not failed, and here's the tricky part. When the actual start time is after the planned start time, and the actual end is not later than 15 minutes after the planned end date. Okay? This is the tricky part right there. Because if you were to go to the change request table, change_request.list, type that in the upper navigation filter and it'll bring you to the entire list of change request records. I only have 100. You probably have more. And if I were to create this filter and start doing this, obviously the state is going to be easy. They said status. There's no status field on the change request out of the box. So if you added it, change your filter accordingly. Let's say state is review and yada, 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 close code. That's not a problem. But when you get to the date, the actual start date, they said is after, what was it? Actual start time is after the plan date. So let's go back to our instance, is after, okay, there's the today part. We do add or after on a field, not there. Is after, you could say relative, but then you're still only talking so many minutes ago. There's some other operators in here. Is more than 0 hours after. Here's the other fields, planned end date. So fool around with some of those. That gets you part of the way there. The other option is, the problem is it only has hours, days, weeks, months, quarters, years. We need minutes. This isn't going to work for us. So you can see you can compare the relative values of two dates. So what I'm going to do is take advantage of some of this, which is in Flow Designer as well, and build on that with a custom action to get them, I don't know if it's going to get them exactly where they need, but it gets them on the right road. So Mr. Who is it? Matt? I'm trying to remember who originally posted this. Matt, yes. Matt posted this, and I'm going to see if I can get this all done. And if the above criteria met, I would like to set it to the close code to successful with no issues and close notes to complete. So they started writing the scheduled job, but it got a little wonky. And I said, why not use Flow Designer? Easier to build, easier to maintain, with the exception of this one script, which isn't that long. Okay, and I will walk you through that script in a minute. I was toying around with it a little bit before, but let me trash all that and start with a new flow. So I did this by going into Flow Designer, new flow, gave it a name, made sure it was in the right scope, and came up with this screen. That's all I did to get here. Not too big. Now, most of us know Flow Designer by going to a record and saying if the record is created or updated, then it will say, great, pick a table, pick a record, what do you want to do, any conditions, but it also works on a scheduled basis. So if you wanted this to happen daily or periodically, maybe I want to run this every hour. I could repeat every 0 days, 1 hour, and this thing will run every 1 hour. I'm going to, just for the sake of it, say, run this every day at 7 a.m. And there's my trigger. Very easy to do. Now, I need to go look up some records. So let's start that record lookup, because it said for all the change records that meet my criteria, underneath ServiceNow Core, I have lookup records. This is effectively doing a glide record query on the change request table. There is change request, and now I can put in my conditions. Now, the conditions are going to work pretty much like they did on the list builder, on the list condition builder. I can say state is review, pretty straightforward, and we'll assume the close code part you can add yourself. Okay, that's pretty easy. The close code is not, I don't have failed in here, but we'll call it unsuccessful for sake of argument. And the actual start date, again, we have similar operators, is more than, oh, but it gets a little crazy in here. We could say 0 hours for this one, because we're comparing, like, we just want to say that it's after that other field. And there's part of it. Now we start to get into a little bit of craziness. The planned start date. Where's my planned start date? There we go. Okay. I can't do the other part because I can't say 15 minutes. What was it, less than 15 minutes if I remember right? Let's go look. Keep your eye on the requirements whenever you're building. The actual end date is not later than 15 minutes after the planned end date. Okay? Oops, sorry. Didn't mean to show all that. Back to Flow Designer. I'm going to get all of these records, assuming that the other ones are a subset. Always put as much in the query as you can so that the database is retrieving as few records as possible. That will make your script run faster. You could, if you were inefficient, grab all the change records without any query on here and say, now go and use an if statement. Like, now that's not effective. Why should I retrieve 100 million records if only 6 of them apply? Your loop would be going for a really long time checking for any of those that match. So I've narrowed down the subset, but I don't have it completely narrowed down because I can't at this point. So let's put done there. Now, in my flow logic, I say for each, this is a looping construct, for each record you find in this lookup records activity. There's my change request records. There's my list of records I want to iterate through. Done. That's my for each. And now I get this sub branch of what's inside of this loop. And here's where I can put the rest of my if statement. But I've already got the records pretty well filtered down. This is where I'm going to save and go off into a script. Now, the script needs to find out if the difference between two dates is less than a certain parameter. So I sketched this out real quickly, like 2 minutes before the show started. Well, let's walk through this. This part is for testing. I'm going to ignore that for a minute, but focus on the function that's above. Okay. First of all, comments, very helpful. Helps you determine what your function needs to do, the inputs and the outputs. I choose this, and I forgot the return. Return Boolean true is value dates are greater than or equal to X minutes apart. Now, I read this requirement backwards earlier. I thought he was looking for the actual end date is 15 minutes after the planned end date. It's actually 15 minutes before the planned end date. So they're giving themselves a grace period, not only saying, hey, we finished before the planned time, but we finished more than 15 minutes before the planned. If I read that one more time, the actual end date is not later than 15 minutes after the planned date. Okay, so they gave themselves a buffer. The actual end date is not later than 15 minutes after the planned update. So this script will still be effective for me. It's not after this. So I want, did they finish late or did they finish really late is what it sounds like. This function takes a start date, which is a glide date time, easy to pass in a field, an end date, which is a glide date time, and I'm making use of this system function called glide date diff. I did a little checking before the shell. This is only available in the global scope. I can verify that by taking this script. Well, let's finish walking through what the script does first. So it takes two strings. So I take my start date and get the display value from that. That's one of the methods available on the glide date time. Do the same thing with the end date. I'm a little anal retentive. I like my equal signs lined up whenever I can, whenever it makes sense. Just easier to read, and you can compare and go, what did I miss on the second one? Why the first one isn't working? Oh, I forgot to change something when I did a copy and paste. Happens all the time. So I think I got that from my older brother. The seconds is then calculated. Now, there's the start date, the end date. I am referring to this page on Glide System from the docs. It's also in the developer portal. And it says, here's Glide System date diff. It takes a string start date, string end date, and Boolean says, if true, it will return, the value will be returned in the number of seconds. If false, it will be returned as days, hours, months, and seconds. I obviously want the number of seconds so that I can calculate the number of minutes. So it returns a string, which is kind of pathetic. I want an integer, but we'll get there. I just roughed this script out. Here is an example, and I can verify that this works. Let's go copy this. I wrote a simple test to say, call my function and set two values, 6:02 and 6 a.m. this morning and 6:02 this morning. So let's go in here. I'm just going to print out the seconds. I'm not returning anything yet. I haven't got that far. On my personal developer instance, under scripts background, I'm going to run this in the global scope just to verify that it runs. And it says 120. There are 120 seconds, last time I checked, between 6 a.m. and 6:02 a.m., which is good. Let's test the other theory in a scope, and it's probably going to puke all over it and say, date diff is not allowed. And to date, I haven't found one that is available, a suitable replacement, without doing the script include wrapper thing, but we're not going to go there today. So for the moment, keep in mind, this code needs to run in the global scope. Now, just as you'd say, well, why can't you just tack on global? Well, it's not a script include, and it doesn't subscribe to that, so that's not going to work. It's just going to say, no, doesn't work. So now we need to convert from the seconds to minutes, and that's going to require us to do an integer conversion. So let's go back to our script. We've got our seconds. Let's say var minutes equals parse int seconds 100 divided by 60. Sound good? We should get a 2. And then we'll gs.info minutes. Paste that in there. We should get a 120. Oh, I'm still in a scope. That was sad. Okay. And it says, not a number. That's too bad. Not 100. I want to go 10. Decimal. This is your base system in here. You guys didn't see me type that, did you? If I put an 8, it will come back with an octal number. If I put 16, it'll come back with a hex number. I want base 10. By default, it's base 10, but I want to make sure that it's explicit in my script. I always do that. It must have gotten burned at one point, and it says, yes, there are in fact 2 minutes. And if you don't believe that's actually a number, you can do what we did on Friday and say the type of that equals type of, which is a great thing to find out what type of variable you have. If you're ever running into crazy, spooky stuff and you don't know what's going on, throw in a type of. Make sure if you expect an object, you've got an object. If you're expecting an integer, you've got an integer. And it says, this is a number. Excellent. Great. I've got a number. Back to our code. Now that we have that, we still need to compare if minutes is greater than or equal to x. X is minutes. Oh no, I already have a var minutes. That's a problem. Let's call this my minutes. That would have been a problem when we get to the script editor. It would have caught that for me. So if my minutes is greater than or equal to minutes, poorly named variables, I admit, but this is an example. You don't have to follow the variable names exactly. So this is my input parameter. This is my calculated value. This is going away. I don't need that anymore. I don't need this one anymore. Let's get rid of that. If it is, I'm going to return true. And if it's not, I'm going to return false. So there is my function. Let's capture that. Answer equals in my test script, and then gs.info. We will say s.getDisplayValue plus, let's do the e.getDisplayValue. And then in our output message, we'll put the actual answer. Answer equals answer. Now, I passed in a 1 to say I only want a difference of 1 minute. So is the difference greater than or equal to 1 minute? I should get a true out of this last statement on the output. And it says true. Now, if I change the parameter and say not 1 minute, how about 15? I should get a false. My code is working the way I wanted. What do I do with that? Well, that's where Flow Designer comes in. I'm going to make a custom action. And the action, for now, is going to go into global. If I want, I could create a new scope and put this action in there. It will show up on its own menu, have a great new spoke for everybody to use. But for sake of time and discussion, I'm going to create a new action. I can either do this plus over here, or I could go back to the home screen and say new action. So let's just, since I'm there already, new action, both do the same thing. I'm going to say time diff. I've got no better name for it. Call it global. Could give it a description. Check if the start time and end time are greater than or equal to X minutes apart. Similar to what my script said. Creating an action. Now I get the action designer. The action designer allows us to take inputs. This is what we're going to prompt the user for. Then do some operations and return some outputs. It's a little function, if you will. It could consist of multiple steps in that function. For me, I only need one, and this is going to be a script. So let's first define our inputs. And I can't do that at the moment because my font is too large. But up here is a create input. And I'm going to call this start time, giving it a proper case, a nice label, because this is what's presented to the users. And this is going to be a date time. I'm going to make it mandatory. Hard to do a calculation if you don't have that. Then I'm going to do an end time. That's going to also be a date time mandatory. And then, you know, it'd be nice on these is default values. Wouldn't that be cool? Then I'm going to say minutes. And that's going to be an integer. Where is my integer? There it is. That will also be mandatory. Those are my 3 inputs. I need 3 things. Just like the function, that's what it's going to consume. So let's do a quick save on that. I really have nothing but inputs. And this plus lets me add a new step. I'm going to create a script step right there underneath utilities. And it says, now the script step also has inputs. What is this function going to receive? Well, it's going to get start. What did I call it in the function? I want to kind of make a match. Was it start time? Start date time. Start date. Start date. And that's going to come from this data pill. The the actions input becomes the steps input. Got to link those two together because everything you pass into the action may not be needed for every step. By the same token, everything that the function needs may not come from the action input. So, end date, let's take that, put that down there, and minutes will come from minutes. Now, those are going to feed into this function. Hey, look, I've already got that at my disposal. So let's copy that out of there, whoop, and paste it into this script. Format it a little nicer, and away we go. What's it outputting? It is going to output a variable called, I've got nothing better than calling it answer, which is a true-false. That's the output of the step, which then needs to be sent back to Flow Designer. So I create an output called answer because I've got nothing more imaginative at this point, and it's going to use this script step, which is poorly named. You can rename these, by the way. Just double click up there and say find date diff. Now, this description looks better. This description looks better. You know, which, if you have multiple script steps in there, they don't all just say script step 1, script step 2, script step 3. You can actually say, oh, the step called find date diff has an answer variable. I'm going to use that. Save it. And if I publish it, it's now available to everybody. But I'm still in development, so I don't want to do that yet. I want to go to my little stacked dots there, configurations, and say, allow me to use draft actions. And now when I come down here, I can say, let's first determine my new action under global. There's my time diff. And time diff, as we said, takes 3 things. What are we sending it? Well, remember for each was going through each change record? I wanted to say actual end date. That's time 1. Planned end date is time 2, which is down here. And minutes is 15. So I want this to be false. It's going to return a true or false. There's my answer. Run that and say if the answer is false. Because if it's true, it means it's greater than or equal to that 15 minutes, and I've exceeded that. So I've now made a custom action. I've done this, and I actually don't have the data to support this, but if this is true, or excuse me, if this is false, then you're going to take your original record, which is the change request record, and update it. So underneath action, update record, we're going to take change request record, whoop, drop that in. It's going to say, what fields would you like? I'm going to change the close code to whatever he wanted. Successful. I'm going to change the close notes to whatever it said in the description. If this works, change it to close notes to complete. Very good. So back to Flow Designer, complete. Can you check OLA definition in customer service management, this statement, because into sending link from here? Going to have to give me a little more info on what we're looking for. So that's generally the flow that you're looking for. So I will post that code back to the GitHub repo. It'll be available just minutes after this show. Don't want to bore you with the housekeeping details of me creating a folder, etc., etc. So save that, and we now have a flow with a custom action. Obviously, I need to go back here and do a publish on this too, once I verify that it's all working. But that's the general gist of how to put together a flow. I can test this. Again, I don't think I have. Oh, let me go back to my change request. I can test it, and because there's no record trigger, I don't have to supply it with anything. It just says, yeah, I'll assume that it's time to run this thing. It's 7 a.m. I run it, and I can check the execution flow. There's no errors. There were no records that matched my data, so it did not go into this and said, hey, I didn't find any records. So I'm going to have to tweak the condition a little bit there about what's happening with those 3 statements. But then when it gets in there, it can do my time diff, and I can check those values. So that's how I would test that. And then look at the results, break this into any further, click this, and I can say, how many did you find? And it will say, I didn't find any. So that's Flow Designer's operational status screen. So I'm definitely going to watch this and implement this tonight, as there's a bunch of changes awaiting my review, and this will save a lot of time. It really does. The scheduled jobs was a nice early implementation, but it relied on scripting. This doesn't. If you do have a condition that's not built in or some functionality that's not available out of the box, you can go and implement it yourself if you've got some scripting capabilities. The nice thing, this is really where the philosophy of, hey, no coders and low coders can definitely take advantage of Flow Designer. You saw there wasn't any scripting involved with go collect a bunch of records, go output them, go change the record status, run it once an hour. There's no scripting involved with that. Much easier than building a scheduled job. Then you call in the pro developers and say, hey, you know what? I'm not available to do this one part where I check if something is 15 minutes apart. And you can make yourself a custom action that says, all right, what do you need? You need 2 dates and a gap. And you want to determine if it's before or after that gap. Now, obviously, I could have done another operator that says, is it equal to, is it less than equal to, is it greater than, to say what sort of check are you doing on this difference. This one is kind of hard-coded, but at least I give a parameter of 15 or 5 or 60 or whatever in minutes. And it returns a true and a false. Maybe I want a number back, and then I check that number and say, is it greater than or equal? A lot of different ways you can slice this. The thing to remember about creating actions is keep these inputs simple. It's easy to go overboard and say, hey, I've got this action, and if I put enough parameters on it, I don't have to write 7 different actions. I just have one that runs 7 different ways. That gets a little heady for the person who's trying to implement this. And remember, there's no UI policies to say, hey, if I give you this, turn that off, and if I give you that, turn these on and prompt for 2 more things. Make them simple little blocks to use. They will be easy to test, easy to maintain. It's reusable functionality. And the virtue of having this as Flow Designer means somebody can come back later and go, wait, our conditions changed. Now imagine trying this with an encoded query or a script. It gets a little messy, and your average new admin isn't going to be able to come in and maintain that 2 years down the road when the condition changes. We're going to change that up a little bit because requirements change, organizations change, staff changes. Someone's going to come along later and have to maintain this. I would rather pass them a Flow Designer flow than a script to a scheduled job. Jay says, I know there's a run once option in Flow Designer, but scheduled jobs do have the on-demand option. They do. Let's see. Do we have an on-demand? Run once. And of course, you can always run the test to run it on demand. So what else does he say? It's not a big deal, but will there be a button to execute on demand? That's kind of what the test button is. Okay. If you open up the flow and you run test, you're running it on demand. You're just skipping the condition part, like the trigger. Hope that answers the question. That's the way I see it anyway. Run once is a time date. Yeah, as it is with a lot of other things. When you do a, I forgot what it was, workflow or scheduled job or something. Run once says, great, when would you like me to run this? Next Saturday. Next June 25th, 2025. Great, give me that. So I am going to, I didn't activate this, so it's not actually going to run, which is good. I don't want it to run, but I will save it. There we go. Hello, Ivan from the Ukraine. Good to see you. I think I'm going to call that one done and put a comment on here. As soon as I get a link to that. So I think I said, I took a clue from this. And then my last comment was, I'm going to do this on tomorrow morning. Top man will be a link in the video after the session, as I will actually be performing Apple platform implementations. Yes, I will put a link in the reply to this to the video that has that. So just to close the loop on all of that, go back to my ideas. Call that one done. Custom actions for managing users and groups in Flow Designer. Oh, since we're on the topic of Flow Designer, let's just make this a Flow Designer show. This is one that came up. Another one, I think it was a community article. It might have even been an internal employee that asked me this and said, hey, we don't have any Flow actions to add users and groups. If somebody puts in a catalog item that says, I want to add this user to a group, similar kind of thing. The only thing you need to know is what are the tables and how are they structured. So if I were to take a flow, actually I'm going to make this a subflow, show you something a little different. Let's create a new subflow, because this isn't bad practice, is to get your modular stuff working as a subflow. Let's call this add user to group. And I'm going to put that, for lack of imagination, put that in global for now. You put it where you want it. And in a subflow, we specify inputs and outputs, very much like a function, very much like an action. So my input for this is, I want a user, which will be a record referring to the user table. And you can see a lot of tables have the word user in them. I want this one in particular, sys underscore user. And that's going to be mandatory. If I'm going to add a user to the group table, this is a common action if you're doing catalog items and people need to be added or removed from a group. Let's also include an input for the group. Okay, what user gets added to what group? Again, we're going to make it a record, and this time we're going to point it to the group table. Fewer tables, but still many that have the word group in them. I want sys user group. That's the key. Now, what do I do when I have a user and a group? I don't know that I necessarily need outputs on this, but bear with me. I am going to make a record update. So action, update. No, I'm going to insert a record. I'm sorry. This is create record. There it is. I am going to create a record. There's a table in the middle of here. There's users and there's groups. And then there's this table in the middle called sys user gr member or group member. And that table says I have a user and a group, and that's what gets looked at when you say, is this person a member of this group? It says, do you have a record in that table that equals this user and group? So in order to be a member, we need to create that membership record. And the table, as I mentioned, is sys user gr member. Now you can start typing the table and it will find it that way as well. Group member. And the fields I want to add are the user is going to take on my user value. Why didn't it let me paste that there? Record's not allowed here. I need a reference field. Let's change my input. Shame on me. It's not a record, it is a reference. It's going to be a reference to user, same operation as before. Someone probably yelling at their screen going, no, Chuck, don't do a record. And this one is going to be a reference to group, which is going to be simply called group. Where is it? Sys user group. gr member, sys user group. Too many things with group in them. Okay, let's try that again. User is user. That's much better. And set group to group. That's better. And that's really all my action needs to do. Now, why didn't I just do that in the flow? Well, I'll show you, because I may need this operation in many flows. You never know. It may be inside of a loop. It may be as a standalone. Maybe there's one catalog that says add a user to a group, but there's another catalog item that wants to run a different flow that says add all these users to a group. And it takes the list of users and does this flow one at a time. So this is repurposable. This is another way to take and make reusable code. Again, no code. Let's save that, publish that, and I could return an output that says, hey, this was successful or not. But in the interest of time, let's create a new flow called, just to differentiate it from the subflow, add user. Add a user to a group. And it's going to trigger on service catalog. Now, I believe I had to turn a couple plugins on to get this. They may be on by default in Madrid. I forgot to check. But if you don't, go into the plugins list. I think it's Flow Designer Service Catalog Support or Service Catalog for Flow Designer, whatever it is. And when you do, you'll get a couple of things. So trigger that on a service catalog, and that says this flow is now available to be triggered by a catalog item. Show you that in just a minute. And what would I like to do? I would like to run a subflow called add user to group. It takes 2 parameters. What are those parameters? Well, I am going to, before I do this, I missed something. I need a step here and say service catalog. Where is it? Service catalog. Oh, they're not all in here. Or maybe it's my font. Get catalog variables right there. Don't forget this part. This messed me up at first. So underneath ServiceNow Core, Service Catalog, get catalog variables allows you to mine out what those are. But I haven't built the catalog item yet. Aha! So let's go do that first. That would help. In my service catalog, let's make that a little bigger so we can read it. Service catalog. I'm going to make a real quick request item. Maintain items. Categories. Maintain items. This is where we create our service catalog items. And let's make a real simple catalog item where we can add user to group. Put that in the catalog for, I don't know, was it technical or was it service catalog? Let's do service catalog. Ta-da. Oops. Sorry, wanted the close lock. Desktop only is fine. We're not doing this on mobile. I don't know why I'm in the ITSM mobile scope. Let's go to global. I think I was doing a demo last week, and that's why that keeps coming up as the start over here. Add user. Oop. Put them on the home row to group. Pick the catalog again. Service catalog, done. And add a user to a group. Save that for a second because it's something I want to show you. Underneath the process engine, and this may be different on your form layout if you're using an older release, there is, because I activated that plugin for the Service Catalog Flow Designer, I now have the ability to choose a flow or a good old traditional workflow. Now, my flow isn't published yet, so if I try it, it's not going to show up. So don't worry about that. We're going to come back and get that in a second, but that's where I set the flow. In the variables, I obviously need something to let me choose a user and something to let me choose a group. So I need a reference field, mandatory, which takes the user. User is good for the variable name. Type specifications is going to be a reference to the user. You can see this is getting a little repetitive. Simple reference qualifier, maybe I only want to say active equals true. If I were making one to delete users from a group, then obviously I may want to include the inactive users. But why would I want to add an inactive user to a group? Let's filter that down with a simple reference qualifier. Bada boom, bada bing. Let's make that the first question. I always forget the order. I always have to add them from the list later. So add a second variable for my group. Click new. We're not mapping this to any field. It's going to also be a reference called group. Very simple example here. We'll call that one group. That's good. Make this a reference to group, sys user group. There it is. Same kind of reference qualifier, I think. Active equals true is good. I don't want to add a user to a group that isn't used anymore. And I forgot the order, which I usually tell myself not to forget. 200. All right, save that. Let's try it. Let's see what we get. Does it look? Looks pretty decent. User and group. Nothing fancy. I don't have description, no icon. You can add that if you like. Now, I need Flow Designer over here to save. Did I publish it? And maybe, I believe it's activate, but activate doesn't have all the parameters in it. So maybe an iterative. Requested item on action number 1 is mandatory and must be filled in. That's my subflow. I'm sorry, I need to publish this one. It is published. Therefore, let's see, properties, there's nothing special in here. Got all that. Let's give it a test and say my user is Able Tutor. I'm going to add them to the application development group. Run the test. Let's just make sure it works before we attach it to that catalog item. This completed, the subflow completed, it created a record, and I can see I passed in 2 sysids. I modified this record. Let's go see if that worked. Over in sys user gr member dot list, I'm going to add the created date into the list and sort reverse chronological. There's Able Tutor in application development. Therefore, if I go into Able Tutor's profile, I should see the related list of groups down here at the bottom. He is in application development. That is exactly what happens when you do this. You click the edit button, and if I were to take that out and save it, it's going to delete that record. So I'm inserting and deleting records into this many-to-many table in the middle of users and groups, and now it's gone. I could add them again. To attach that to the catalog item, let's go back to my catalog item, add user to group. When I want this to trigger, I go to the process engine, hit the magnifying glass, and still don't see it. Why not? There is a reference qualifier on here that is boggling me. I did this once before, and it took me a while to figure out why it wasn't working. So we learn by our mistakes. Reference qualifier, advanced, catalog flow filters, get service catalog flows. Is that not a service catalog flow? This is my flow. That's my flow operation. That's my subflow there. Did I test from there or did I test from here? I tested from here. Let's test the entire flow. Oh, it's probably because I didn't activate it yet. But we're doing a layered up test. It worked at the subflow. Let's test it at the flow. The requested item record is going to say what I don't have a requested item record for this. Haha, can't test it. So that's what the service catalog is looking for. I need to go back and get my catalog variables to finish this flow. Sorry, I feel like I'm jumping around a bit and I apologize. So requested item could be any old requested item. Or it could be from the data pill trigger catalog requested item. I would prefer to use that rather than a static item, because that way when that changes, I'll get new variables. Now my template is the the catalog item. So I say, which catalog item? Add user to group. Here's the variables it's got available. Put those over there. Now, see where I'm going with this? I have the variables. They are references that this thing needs to consume. I can then pass the user to the user, the group to the group. They get all the way from the catalog item to the flow. The flow takes those variables out, passes them to the subflow. The subflow then does the record operation. I know it feels a little abstracted with that subflow in there. I could have, as I mentioned, I could have easily done the create record right here. But that means if I wanted to change that functionality, maybe add a log message, maybe add a notification, something in this subflow seems very trivial at first, but it gives me the flexibility of separating the the logic from the action. There may be a condition in this catalog item that says, I'm only going to do this if I have an approval. There we go. We could put approval in the flow. And then if it's approved or if it's auto-approved based on some data lookup rules, you could do that as well. Okay, now that we've got that, let's save it. We'll test our flow. We need to first create an item. We haven't activated this yet. So back on our catalog item. We are on a catalog item. I haven't attached it to this flow yet. Let's try it. And we will put in Able and the group application development again, because we deleted it last time, and say order now. It says, congratulations, your new request and request item. Here's my request item. Let's take 10,008 and run that through our tester. Test that one. Run the test. It runs. Always good to have it run a little while. Your flow and action have been updated. The flow is automatically click this link here so that I can see, did it run? Was it successful? All that kind of stuff. Get the catalog variables. I would assume that these variables, these sysids are in fact what I want. Yes, they are, because the output data is application and able tutor. The subflow ran successfully. I can click this to see what the subflow did. I can go into the subflow's operational status. Nope, that wasn't the operational status. That was the actual. Let's get rid of these other ones from the change request earlier. And everything ran. So again, theoretically, I manually triggered that flow based on this request item. It did not run its own yet because I haven't hooked up the item. If I go to my group members table again, there's application development. Looks great. Let's delete it so that I can run it live one more time. Because I'm going to, now that I know that it's tested okay, delete please, thank you. Go back to Flow Designer and take my flow and activate it. Because I want it to run when the records are triggered. Obviously, you can expand on this to say, delete records, delete a lot of them. Like I said, there might be another flow that's triggered on multiple users. You might have two different items. You might have one that says, add user to group, or add users to group, add multiple users to group. And it would take a list of type, parse that apart, take all those different sysids and reference values, and call this subflow over and over and over again. Your call. I'm just showing you a couple of different ways to do this. Now that it's activated, with any luck, it should show up in my catalog item as a selectable flow. Completely unrehearsed demos here. Click this flow, and there it is, my flow to add a user. Update that, and I've hooked everything together. So now I have a catalog item where somebody can come in real quick and say, add this user to a group. This is a great way to allow non-admins to do administrative work. Or if they've got a group, maybe you put this in their own catalog, or you put a user criteria on there that says only this group of group managers can submit these and turn out group permissions or group entitlements. So that is, I didn't touch a single community article directly. These were all both previous articles. That is all I have for today. Thank you very much for joining me for the Flow Designer Show. This has been June 17th. If you find something useful again, remember, go in to the, click the like button on YouTube, or if you're in the community, click that helpful link. Let others know that there's something useful, maybe mildly entertaining, that you can take advantage of, that you said, this is good stuff. I want to let you know. And they'll appreciate that for you. If you learned something today, don't forget to share it, and you will be helpful. Thank you, and until tomorrow, take care, everybody. Bye.